Welcome to the B2B Influencer Marketing Chat Series. This is actually the last edition before the summer, and I'm very happy to have again two very interesting men this time. Before I forget, my name is Mariska Kestelo and I'm the founder of Word of Mice, and I'm passionate about B2B influencer marketing. Today we're going to dive in the topic from what can we, the meetings and events industry, learn from other industries about B2B influencer marketing. What have they done? Can we gain more insights and inspiration? And I'm very happy to welcome Tom Augenthaler. He's the founder of Influencer Marketer. He's a speaker, consultant and trainer. And to have David Wing. He's the founder of Wing Digital Marketing. I don't need to say that we're all passionate about B2B influencer marketing. So welcome gentlemen, welcome in our show. Would you like to share some words about yourself and about your career before we start with the questions?
Sure, my name is Tom Augenthaler, and I've been involved in influencer marketing since about 2007 or so, where I got my start with HP. I was there as part of the PR department. And I got started with B2B influencer marketing around 2009 when I left HP and I joined a small consultancy. And as part of that consultancy, part of my challenge or part of my mandate was to build up the B2B practice. So I did that, and I started with, funny enough, with HP, the enterprise division. So that's how I got my start.
Great, nice. So David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm David Wing. I'm the founder of Wing Digital Marketing, which is no surprise considering the name. I've been in marketing, digital marketing, social media marketing for about 10 years now, and B2B marketing for about the last 6 or 7, between agencies and various different levels. But generally, it's just been B2B, which has been my bread and butter. And like with Tom as well, and like with a lot of B2B enterprise work in itself, it tends to be towards the technical side of things. So tech companies. So I've worked with lots that launched their own campaigns, and we ran them as well. So yeah, it's a growth industry.
Okay, perfect. But can you explain how did you get involved in B2B influencer marketing? Because it's not so obvious. It's totally actually not really common. If I explain what I do and I say I work with influencers, but people know it a little bit, but actually it is, I suppose you both also I have a hate-love relationship with the word influencers.
Yeah.
But I think that's an interesting discussion for another session. But David, how did you get involved actually in B2B influencer marketing? How did you discover the need or saw the opportunity?
Yeah, I was kind of thrown into it, quite frankly. I worked with a few agencies, and generally those agencies just happened to be in the business-to-business sector. So I was running social media accounts and heading up their content side of things. And I transitioned into a job with an agency that had both a B2C and a B2B sector. So one side of the room tended to be 20 to 23-year-olds. The other side of the room tended to be, well, we'll be gracious and say older. So I was sort of transitioning.
Polite English.
So it was thrust upon me. But given that I seem to have more of an aptitude towards that as well, it wasn't really an issue. And I was lucky enough to be given the opportunity to just run with it pretty much from the start, because like Tom said, B2B marketing, I mean, it hasn't really, influencer marketing hasn't really been around a ridiculously long time. Mm-hmm. And as you said, Mariska, as well, most people don't really know of its existence. And as it grows, then we get the opportunity to develop it ourselves. And that's what I was given. So I had a few very large clients that I was basically just given and told to create a strategy and a program, which looking back, wasn't really the best direction, but it was a steep learning curve, and it happened quickly, and it was fun all the way through, and it's led me on this path, and that's where I am right now.
Okay, great. Well, we dive further into the failures of successes, but Tom, how well you said you started at HP your career, where you got involved also in PR, but where did you? How did you get involved really in B2B influencer marketing? Where was the moment that you thought this is actually also B2B influencer marketing?
Yeah. When I left HP, it was like around 2009 or so. The economy really wasn't doing very well at that point. I don't know if everybody remembers, but there was all those bank failures, and the governments were stepping in, and it was a really bad scenario. But with all that being said, marketing still has to happen. So if you're in business, you still have to find ways in which to find your ideal customers and to connect with them. So when I joined the consultancy, I was told, hey, we've got we're onboarding a new client. We need you to help us do this and to design a strategy and a method for, making this happen and executing it. I was like, okay. So it was HP Enterprise. Mm-hmm. So, it started with the server division there, and then other business units within the enterprise division started seeing what we were doing and wanted to get involved. So, enterprise storage, enterprise networking, enterprise software, all of these different verticals within the enterprise business at HP, started coming to us saying, well, this is what we'd like to do. Now, every one of them had different challenges. It's not just, we need to get in front of influencers and get some content out there. Everybody wants to get more content out there, especially good, high quality content. But it's a matter of, are you reaching the right audience with that content? So, like I said, every little division had its own business unit, had its own challenges, and we had to figure out a way in which to find those ideal audience. Now, in those days, we didn't have all these influencer platforms out there. I mean, there was not, 700 different tools and platforms and whatever else. I mean, very, very little was available. So, a lot of the times you just had to go out and start searching and finding bloggers. So the first thing we were always looking for is people who had expertise, and tried to seek them out and then figure out what they were all about. So the best way to do that is to connect with them personally and, have a call with them. So I would get on the phone and talk to them. But I mean, every vertical has its own challenges. So one vertical, for instance, the networking vertical, had a very difficult time because Cisco was a major player in that area, enterprise networking, and they dominated it. So HP was saying to us, well, how can we engage some influencers and start getting the word out about that? Well, what you do is you find influencers that are neutral or who perhaps don't even know about it, your particular business or your product. So that's what we did. We started prospecting and finding influencers who were more neutral. Now, if they're a fanboy of Cisco, we just avoided them because we weren't going to turn those people around. So you try to find the people that don't know about it or are neutral, and then trying to get more and more share of voice just through that, and then start to turn them. And I'll give you an example. I went to a show called Interop. And it's a big show here in the United States, held in multiple locations, and it's all around enterprise networking. And we had invited a bunch of influencers to Vegas at that point, Las Vegas, and we were sitting around a table having a drink. It was towards the end of the day after doing a whole bunch of different activities with them. And one of the influencers, a major networking influencer, turned to me and said, hey, thank you for inviting me to this. I had no idea that HP was doing all this work in the enterprise area, in the networking area. And I said, yeah, sure, whatever. So, we start building relationships with those people, and then you start turning the conversation towards you or your client. So that's how we actually started doing it in that case.
Yeah, because I think you said a couple of very important points because a lot of people still think influencers in a B2C and B2B level, I would say, environment are the same. And I think there you said, of course, a couple of important points: expertise, that you select
Mm-hmm.
people based on their knowledge, based on their experience. You connect with them personally. You don't send out a mass mailing like a lot of agencies. We laugh because we know, but still there are a lot of agencies who still work like that. I mean, I think almost every week an email from a fashion agency somewhere in New York. Well, I'm totally not into fashion. So it is really really interesting, and also like what you said, build up that relationship and build up that personal relationship, and then building up your community. And also think, you didn't say it, but you means also building up that on a long term. And I think those are really, I would say, essential elements that makes B2B and B2C makes it really, really.
That's a really great point you brought up there. I should have clarified that a little bit more, I guess. But David and I we're so immersed in the B2B side of things that we just sort of take these things for granted.
I know, but the listeners not, so therefore
No, exactly. So let me clarify that. So on the B2C side of things, most people think in terms of Instagram. So Instagram has become the dominant platform on the consumer side of things, with a runner-up being YouTube, and now TikTok and some others coming up, becoming more prominent as well. But on the consumer side of things, it's all about, they look at the size of the audience, and that's the way influencers are initially measured there. So you've got your mega and your macro and your micro and your nano, all of that is by audience size. Well, on the B2B side of the fence, you're going to look at things much differently. You're looking at expertise. You're looking to see, does this person really know what they're talking about? Let's say it's railroads. Do they really know the railroad business? And the only way to figure that out is to do two things. One, the first, you're going to go to their LinkedIn profile and you're going to see where they worked, where they work now, the kind of content they're producing. Are they a consultant? What businesses have they worked for? And you're going to look to see how good that content is. Does it resonate not only with the ideal audience, but do other industry experts also consider them to be an expert? So you're really looking for, there's a trend in the B2B area now where influencers are starting to call themselves independent analysts because they don't like that word.
Independent, sorry, can you repeat that?
Independent analysts. Yes, so
we used to just call them experts. That we found we were much the same, Tom. It's nobody seemed to like the influencer term. When I first started working with the B2B sector, they just didn't know that they were even regarded as influencers, so they preferred to be called experts, and that's how we ran with it. It wasn't really an ego boost; it was just based on experience.
Yeah,
exactly.
And do you have anything to add? I mean, on the fact. So we're talking now about the difference between B2B and B2C, influencer marketing, and how do you select, say, also the right people, and then of course, the name. Some people say thought leaders, some people say experts, some people say professional content creators. I think it all depends what kind of type of influencers you need for your company or for your campaign.
Yeah. There's key opinion leaders as well, Coles.
But it's more Chinese, but it's used more in China than here.
I could see that coming through as well. But I mean, it's interesting to see that sort of the connection with the B2B experts or key opinion leaders, whatever you want to call them, is very much research to look for their expertise, and then a follow-up conversation, much like we're having right now. Although when I first started doing it, we weren't really doing video calls that much. We were using Zoom sporadically, and now obviously it's everywhere. But it was just literally picking up the phone and just having the call, sending a DM through Twitter. Hey, can we have a chat? This is kind of what we're looking to do. It's completely new. We don't really know where we're going with this, but we'd love to have you on board. Would you like to assist? And then you have the personal call, and you are as honest and as clear as a marketer really can be, and take it that way.
Don't say that. Potential clients are listening.
But from the B2B side of things, I mean, we did have software that we could use, but I found that it was only just coming in. And from a B2B side of things, honesty and clarity and the transparency straight from the offset worked a treat. I had a call list of I think I did my research for my first program. I had about 25 names on that list. I called them all, and only 2 asked for money, which was a big thing at the time because we didn't have any budget. Honestly, there was no budget. It was budget for me, and there was budget for the business, the agency to run it, and then the rest of it was literally no, it just didn't exist. And there was only a couple of people that actually said, no, I need $3,000 to do this and $10,000 to do that. I had one that asked for $25,000 to turn up to an event, just to be there, not even to speak. To which
been there too.
I'm sorry, I'm losing you. So, but from a B2C side of things, the technology is there, the research is there, the software is there to be able to wholesale look at B2C influencers a lot easier. Sort of a more blanket approach that didn't seem to be, certainly at the time, to be quite so much of a bonding that seems to come along with B2B influencer marketing.
But even on the consumer side, I think people look at this the wrong way a lot of the time, and that is they're always looking at the surface numbers rather than, does this influencer really match what we're trying to do here? Now, yes, sometimes it's great to have a lot of voices out there pumping out a lot of content, but at the end of the day, you want to build relationships with people that you can work with on a long-term basis. I still talk to influencers today that I was working with on behalf of HP back in 2007. And I don't even really do anything with them on an active basis these days because I don't have a client that really matches them, but I stay in touch with them, and they're experts in all their various areas. So if I've got questions about video or something, I've got people I can go to, photography or whatever it happens to be, and they're the first people I go to. So I keep relationships not only for a client but for me, right?
It's a wonderful resource to have. I have maybe 5 or 6 that I spoke with 7 or 8 years ago that I'm still solidly in touch with now, and even recently got in touch with in regards to a GDPR question that I had. And while I still refer to him as a GDPR expert, although he doesn't because it's a fairly new area, it's a wonderful thing to have that relationship that's been built over a period of time, and it's built on honesty and clarity and just understanding what we're both getting out of the relationship.
The other thing, those are great points, David. The other thing that's important to note is that on the consumer side, the sales cycle is a very short one. So I remember when I was at HP, like every month or so, we were announcing some new laptop product. I was in charge of consumer laptops at that point in time in 2007, 2008 from a PR perspective. So we were announcing some new product or some new iteration of a product all the time. On the B2B side of things, new products do not get announced very often at all. It's maybe every 6 months, a year, whatever it happens to be. And what happens is the sales cycle for each of those is long. So it could be a few months, it could be 6 months. Heck, I remember sometimes it was a year, right? If it's a big purchase, an enterprise is going to take a very measured approach to determining which product is the best for them to buy. And they're going to talk to industry analysts, they're going to talk to consultants, the executives there are going to get involved if it's a really big purchase. They have relationships with salespeople at different institutions, at different vendors, and they're going to talk to all those people, and they are going to determine the best product and the best service package for them. So the influencers you choose need to fall within that customer journey, right? Some are going to be top of funnel. Some are going to be some of them are the middle of the funnel towards the consideration portion, right? Now, as you get down towards the sales decision, there are other influencers that operate really well down there. So you're going to want to have some down there too. On top of that, think not just getting content developed for you or your client, but you want that content, once it's developed, you'd like to have the rights to use some of that content, repurpose it. So you're going to want to use pull quotes, right? Maybe you use some of those on your website, your sales page. You're going to use it in your email marketing list. You're going to use perhaps some of it in your content marketing. You're going to have internal comms in your company, right? Whether your company is 50 people or 5,000 people, you want to keep the internal people updated as to
Yeah.
what's going on as well. And that's valuable content that can be used for those purposes, because some of the best salespeople, of course, are those rank and file people that are experts inside the company. So there's, you got to remember to use the content once it's developed, not just have it there go, oh great, here's a series of videos or blog posts, great,
Oh,
okay.
no, indeed.
You've got to repurpose it and use it again and again and again, right?
Yeah, indeed, because I think it's very interesting what you mentioned, that the lead time, I mean, most of the listeners will be working in related with meetings and events. That is often, of course, depending on the target audience. If we talk, for example, about international association, the lead time is also quite long. Sometimes it can take up to 2 or 3 years before they decide where they go with their annual conference, to which destination. So, because I always say, you have to be, first of all, it has to be part of their strategy, and has to be a very long-term relationship. And a lot of people underestimate that value of that relationship. And I would like to dive further into the topic, because there are a lot of listeners, and we talk now a little bit in general about B2B influencer marketing, but I would like to make it also a little bit tangible, so people will also, I would say, have ideas or suggestions what they could do. You have done now both have done several campaigns for several companies. And you don't need to mention an example from the meetings and events industry, because I don't think you have one inside for a hotel chain. But it will be good. It will be good to have actually from another industry to inspire the meetings and events industry. So can you I would say, give an example of a campaign? How did you get started with the client, and what was actually the end result? And I know it's still trial and error, but David, can you give an example of a campaign that you have done together with, or perhaps you were both on the project, that you have done together with the client, and say, how did you get started, and what was actually the outcome, but also to make it tangible, so what the influencers have done, because that is also, a lot of people think it's just a blog post or just a tweet. It's much more than that. So also to give a little bit of more insights and information about that related topics. Okay.
Yeah, I think probably to help out a little bit, considering the environment that we're in at the minute, probably one that's more digital and more remote is probably one of the last clients I was working on for a previous agency before I left the UK to come to Brazil. And that was back in December. So I was working for a fragrance company, or rather a pharmaceutical company that created fragrances and cosmetics and such. And their interest, I developed a strategy for them. They were a client on the B2C side, but we were looking to branch into the B2B, which is where I was, enlisted to lead. And the idea was to see what we could actually accomplish from them, to see what other businesses, not competitors, obviously, but what other complementary businesses that we could bring into the loop effectively for their sales team to convert and to actually work with going forward, much like relationship development that we would do in B2B with influencers anyway. So the idea was to create a strategy, which I did, which was entirely digital. There wasn't the budget for flying people around. It was based on podcasts primarily, with blog posts as complementary. And like Tom said, disseminating it and cutting out phrases and quotes and putting them out across Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and wherever else we thought it was of benefit. We had an in-house editing team, and we had an outsourced editing team as well. So we did the visuals in-house, still the visuals in-house, and we did the audio and the video outsourced to a video editor. But the idea was to film, set up a podcast in-house for the agency based out of San Francisco. We decked it out. It looked beautiful. It had a lot of plant life, like you have Mariska behind you. And the idea was to make it look as green and healthy as possible. And that's what the brand was looking for, and what the brand is, was developing, and certainly is now, as totally healthy and totally green in all aspects. And my task was, as almost as a one-man band, because I was the only sort of B2B expert in the house, was to reach out and look for those individuals that, as I say, were complementary. So they were either influencers, they could still be influencers in the B2C side of it, but they were working on the B2C side, on the B2B side. So they would maybe reuse their influencer channel on Instagram, and we would transition it towards the B2B side of things. We would make use of them there, or it was a business based out of Italy or Germany that provided a certain amount of product that they needed to use. We had Zoom calls that were obviously converted as audio files. They weren't, and video files that we would then speak to pharmaceutical experts in their field, see how they were developing, how their technology was changing, how they could really emphasize that not everything in the pharmaceutical side of things had to be with a negative slant and directed that way. And this was a project that we worked on over 6 months and is still ongoing now, because once you've developed it, once you've built it, once you've strategized it and you have the relationships there, then you can repurpose it and you can get people back on board and you can revisit what they've said and see how they've developed what they're doing. Because a lot of it is a reciprocal relationship. Because when you're reaching out, you can't just constantly ask for something. You have to be giving back. And
that's what I would say. It's a relationship. It's give and take. It's like a marriage, I always say. Sometimes you have to give more. And
that's it.
So,
it's human to human marketing, as they say.
Yes, and also something with practical question which I receive also a lot, and I think there's also a hate-love relationship on that point. Is, have you paid for the influencers? Well, of course, it depends also. Because I think it also depends on which person and what kind of task they are doing. You have paid the influencers who were involved, or part, or depends on the workload they did.
Yeah, not monetarily. I mean, we've paid for transport, and we've given access to we've paid for hotels, we've paid for access to conferences, but it hasn't been a flat fee, because generally these programs, because like we said at the beginning, B2B influencer marketing is technically still a youthful sector, despite the fact that Tom's been in it for over 10 years. I've been at it for about 7 now, and it's just people's perception and trying to get brands to understand that it needs to come out of their marketing budget. It's always an uphill climb until you can really show the results, as we're beginning to do now, and people, businesses are starting to take it on board. But no, we generally don't pay. It's not to say that the B2B experts, opinion leaders, whatever, don't deserve it. They do. They really do. Because the kind of information they have, information they have is gleaned on 20, 30, sometimes 40 years worth of experience across multiple disciplines. You cannot, I was going to say you cannot buy that, but you can ask for it,
indeed.
And sometimes you just can't afford to pay for it.
But I think it's also depending what type of influence you have. Of course, we call it the social media content creators. Perhaps people have less followers, less experience, and you have, of course, the thought leaders who have more expertise that you can get involved. I think it also depends what type of influences you want to get involved in your campaign as well.
Well, that's another point as well. Yeah, because that's another point, because a lot, like when I first started, and I said, speaking to these individuals, they didn't see themselves as influencers, and generally it's not their bread and butter. No. They're not spending every day of every week going out to conferences. Obviously they're not now, but they're not spending all that time going out and doing all these things. They are writing blog posts, they are putting things out on their social media, but it's generally, about the businesses that they're working with. It's generally showing their expertise and sharing the knowledge that they have from helpful and beneficial side of things. They're not looking for monetary reciprocation here. They have a business. They're either independent or they work for a large entity, and because they're not conflict, they're more than willing to share this information with you. It's a wonderful thing.
So Tom, can you give an example of actually a campaign that you've done, and what kind of people you recruited, and what the tasks were, especially also dive into the tasks of the influencers, what they have done?
Yeah. So, okay. So the problem is that with the B2B sector, as David kind of alluded to before, is that you can't always talk about the work you've done overtly, right? So I have to allude to it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I know you have to be cautious, but give us a general, I would say, because the people are eager to get those tangible insights,
So,
and how can you convert it, especially to our industry, which is of course in I would say in tears nowadays with the COVID-19, the meetings and events industry. So therefore, yeah, if you can give a
if you
little bit.
can't do events, what do you do? That's the question.
Yeah.
Well, the event itself can either be canceled, you can reschedule it and push it out further into the future, or you can try to make it a virtual event. Now, if you're going to try to make it a virtual event, which many firms are trying to do now, the main question they have to ask themselves is, what kind of value are we going to provide at this virtual event that the customer or the ideal customer that comes to it, the attendee, is not going to be able to get elsewhere? This is you can't conduct a virtual event the way you conducted physical events in the past. You can't go up and do a keynote presentation about what the information in a press release, right? Because every company uses an event so as a launching pad for some new initiative or something like that. Well, you're going to have to provide some more value here because we're living in a very chaotic environment, right? We've got the COVID-19 thing. Are we quarantining or not? Where are we doing it? How much is it affecting everybody? We've got work from home, digital transformation has been accelerated to like the 10th degree. So what does all this mean for our business? Well, if I'm going to attend your virtual event, I want to get some answers here. I want to get some good ideas, right? So that's one thing. But in terms of your question, Mariska, an example I can give you is just like, look, if you're working with a large company, they're typically trying to reach different audiences for different, business initiatives. It's not just like consumers. Like I'm after, females between the ages of, 25 and 35 for this particular product. Boom, it's a lot more nuanced than that. So I was working with a client not long ago, and they were after getting more involved with the procurement audience. There are now chief procurement officers in some of these large enterprises. So how do you get in front of those people? Well, what we did was the initiative is to create a podcast. The podcast is housed on their website, and the host of the podcast is an influencer, and every guest on the podcast, each podcast episode, is an influencer. All right, so the cost to create that was not on paying influencers to participate in it, because if you create something like that and you're going to evangelize it, promote it, and do all these things around it, you're essentially telling the influencer, we're going to promote the heck out of you with this. So they're more likely to get involved with that without charging a flat fee. It's also, hey, I've been asked to do something with XYZ company. That's actually a credibility boost for the influencer, right? So that's one example. So we took that and then we housed it on the website, and now I think the client is going to expand it further. So they're going to create more episodes around it, which is wonderful, because that's what you can do with a podcast, right? It doesn't have to end.
It's a great way indeed to engage, and to engage with thought leaders, and it doesn't cost that much. And that's also what I'm saying, because a lot of people have the perception, if we talk about influencer marketing, that there are huge budgets because they think, oh, we need to pay, say, $100,000 for one post, or actually, that is not necessary.
So David was talking about this before. There's a lot of opportunities for earned content with B2B influencers, and that is the case. There's a few reasons for that. One, like David said, they're employed at some company and they can't accept compensation like that. It's just not ethical or even legal. So there's an opportunity there. If you're bringing them to a physical event, which has been done so much in the past, in a sense that is a trade value, right? Because I mean, you're flying them in, you're putting them in a hotel, you're probably paying for some fancy meals, so there is a value trade there. Now I've had influencers say to me, well, I still want a flat fee to come on top of that. And they have to, if for that to happen, there has to be a darn good reason to pay them that fee. So they had better have a super engaged audience that you want to reach, they can prove it, beyond just social media metrics. Who are they? Tell me, I want to see some more data around that, right? But and then maybe they're speaking at the event. So if they're speaking, even if it's a virtual event, you might want to throw them $1,000, to say, hey, thank you for for speaking at our event as part of the panel, or moderating a panel, or even keynoting a portion of it, or something like that. But there's all these different ways in which you can work with them. So you could create, let's say, you create an interactive map on your website, and it was a little journey thing. We did this with a client, and I participated in it. I did not come up with the idea. I just want to make that clear. But what it was is that it was a little interactive map, and as the visitor to the page came on, they could click on different nodes of the map, and it would pop up a little pop-up window, and it would take them on a little journey throughout the world, because the map was of a world map, and it started here and it ended here. So they'd go on a little journey, and all of the information in the pop-up windows was provided by influencers.
Oh, nice.
So yeah,
nice,
so again, you're leveraging expertise outside of your organization. If you go to IBM and you clicked on something like that, and it was all IBM people speaking about IBM, you would probably turn it off after the first node, because it's like, what good is this?
Yeah, it doesn't feel really,
right?
That doesn't feel really, authentic. I mean, if people
so so it's got to be around a topic that the audience cares about, right? It's got to be a topic that perhaps they're challenged with, or challenged by. So COVID-19, for instance, how do you deal with that, or something? I mean, you could come up with all sorts of things, but it's got to be around a topic that they're going to care about, and then you pull in expertise from outside of your organization to provide that value. And you'll find that the influencers that you enroll in those types of initiatives will do it very often for no cost, because they're so happy that, hey, I'm being included in this thing that's going to be evangelized and promoted and everything else, and I can show this to other companies and say, look, this is how they leverage me, and I could do this with you, and so that's the way I'd approach it.
Yeah, of course. But I think it's also very different. Like I said, what type of influences do you need? Because if you would like to have more, people who do extra work, or they would prepare a presentation, I mean, that is a lot of, that is, of course, a lot of work. I see we have two questions. David, if you have anything to say, I would like to give you the word, and then we go.
Just to touch on what Tom was just saying there as well. I mean, it's we call them I think one of the ways that we actually got a lot of influencers to take part in programs over the years has been referring to them as independent experts, and really clarifying that we're not looking at any point to sort of corrupt their independence. It's based on their experience over the years and their honesty. And if they're going to say something about a competitor, obviously we're not going to, we're maybe going to edit that part out or whatever, but we're not going to steer them to the point where they're just screaming from the rooftops about a particular product just because we're asking them to take part. We want to know exactly what they think of the functionality, why they think this service is better, or why they think it's maybe not better. Maybe we're looking to do it just fully from an honesty perspective, and we just want an independent review, which we're going to be clear to our audience straight off and say, look, this isn't everybody on staff saying we're amazing. This is other people that we believe our product is great. We've handed it to them. We've asked them to review it to some extent, and they've come back and this is what they think. We would like you to know that we care, and we want your help growing as a business. I think it's from sourcing of independent experts, it's one way to go, and it certainly worked very well over the years.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's great feedback. I think it's great insights also for the meetings and events industry. I have two great questions. One is actually about brand reputation. One person is joining. Claudia is joining from she's based in Argentina, but she's in Brazil, and she said, I've seen how 6 or 7 brands have cancelled contracts with top influencers. Well, I think it's more in the B2C environment, but still, who throw the party during quarantine and post it on Instagram. immediately customers questioned the brand about their relationship with the influencer. Contracts were cancelled, but I believe damage was done to the brands. And how do you say, do consumers forget easily about incidents like this? If you would, do you also have, I would say, do you think also, you can say, influencers can leverage, of course, your product, but they can also damage your product? So how do you think the clients will react on incidents like this? They would,
Yes.
this is tricky.
I'm going to let David go first.
Thanks. Cheers, Tom. Yeah.
I know it's a challenge.
Neither of us are B2C experts, but yes, we could probably handle this. I think there's no problem.
Yeah.
Because over the years, it's the same thing. And it's the key question that comes back to influencer marketing. It doesn't matter what sector you're in. It's always about, have you found the right influencers for the job? You know, have you had the calls? Have you aligned with them? Have you made sure that they believe in your product and they're going to do it the right way? If you haven't done your due diligence, then you're on then it's your own fault. You're going to get into trouble, and that's often what happens. But also, you might find as well that the brands themselves don't have the expertise in regards to influencer marketing. They see the dollar signs and they hope that they're going to get something from it. You know, Brazil is synonymous with parties. I live in Brazil. You know, it's party central when there isn't COVID-19. But that being said, still trying, and it's the main selling point. A lot of the time, you get, like any other activation even in the B2B side of things. You take them to a conference, it's a big party
they always see the dollar signs. I like your expression, because that's what a lot of people think. If they have influencer dollars, the dollars will come in. They will come in floods. But I think you said it very well. Do your research and search with which influencers, I would say, do you want to work with. And if you don't have the expertise in house, get people like you in house who can do that qualification and that research aspect. Tom, do you have anything else to
okay,
add?
so I want to answer Claudia's question about the brand reputation. So I don't know the specifics about what was said about the cancellation. Mm-hmm. But what I'm inferring from all of this is that because of COVID-19, their budgets have been slashed. So the budget has rolled out and cascaded out to the influencer program. So now they've got to stop working or paying some of the influencers as part of this. Well, this is where your relationship is going to come into play. So the first thing I could just tell you what I would do. If that happened and I was the influence marketer in-house, or the lead agency person.
No, we're talking about the influencer who were at the party during quarantine time. So this is something else where your relationship comes in. So they were at the party during quarantine time, so gathering people where where actually the law was saying stay at home. Yeah, and influencers should give a leading example. And if I have a contract with, say, HP or another, or with Hilton, and I'm throwing a party in quarantine time, then I think
that's part of it. So what is, what's been conveyed to the influencer? So did the brand not provide any direction? Is it just left up to the influencer to figure out what to do? I mean, I would get on the phone with them and say, look, we want to do this, but we have to do it in a way that is conveying to the audience that we're responsible. So how are we going to do that? I would probably brainstorm with them. I mean, that's the way I am. I wouldn't just leave it to the influencer to go figure it out. And then if they screw it up, then cancel the contract. That to me shows a lack of leadership. Mm. So for me, I would be careful. And I mean, COVID is a serious issue. So if you're going to market during this time, you've got to figure out a way with the influencers that you're going to do it in a responsible manner. So I'd first talk about it internally. What do you think we can do? Mm-hmm. Then I would take it out to the influencers, brainstorm with them a little bit. What can we do around this? But at the same time conveys something responsibly and shows leadership in this area. Here we are getting together, but we're maintaining social distance. We have the masks on. We're not, maybe we're not drinking. Right? I mean, I'll just tell you, the first thing I've noticed here in Texas is social distancing and everything goes out the window as soon as alcohol is introduced into the situation. So it's like, people have a couple of drinks and then it's like, oh yeah, they relax. So,
yeah, but I think alcohol
maybe
is
you say,
everywhere. Yeah.
maybe it's like a no alcohol party or something. I mean, whatever you're going to do, there's ways to have fun without alcohol too. Let's be serious, right? So, I mean, I would try to structure something or put something in place that was going to convey that you wanted, they were going to do this responsibly. You don't just leave it up to the influencers. Too many brands just say, oh, here, go do this for us. And, leave it up to the influencer and they screw it up. Well, cancel the contract, right?
Well, I think it's good what you're saying here. It's a two-way relationship. If they were at the party, even if it was in their free time where they were not allowed, I think it's building up the relationship, selecting, but also, like you said, give also the influencers guidance, what they can do and what they can't do. Because if they're still at the party, for them, it's totally, I would say, totally normal. But if in the meantime you would have had a phone call before and said, well, this is totally not appropriate. So I think it's again of a long-term relationship that you build up. And some people you could, I would say, know if they would do something, but also by selecting the right people and invest in those relationship and continue the communication. Then we have a last question because we're already a bit over time. So a great question. It already came up actually in a previous edition, but I think it's interesting to hear it from your point. If you work with international audiences and of course with international influencers, what are your concerns around the variations in advertising laws in each territory with regards to declaring when an endorsement is paid? I know, for example, if you would, HP is based in the US and you would work with influencers in different countries, even if they would get paid or even they would get something, I would say, we say in Dutch, paid in natura, so if you get a gift or something else, how do you address and how can you work according to the law? Do you say this is really up to the influencer, or do you discuss this in a contract or in a sort of agreement?
Look, if you're doing earned content, I can't tell you how many times I'm doing a campaign now for a client, a B2B client. I don't have any contracts with influencers, not one. The only one that is coming about is through a sponsored piece. But for the earned stuff, it's not, there's no contract. So let's put that on the table right now.
Okay.
So now what I convey to every influencer I work with is we have to comply with the rules around being very clear about, is this sponsored content or not? If it's earned, it's a little bit harder. It's not exactly sponsored because I pitched them on it. It's like pitching a reporter. I had to almost convince them that this is a good idea. But still, they could say, look, I was approached. I mean, I would just say honesty is the best policy. So just be honest and transparent about interactions like that. Now, if content is sponsored, you have to say, this is sponsored content. Say it up front, right? And if that value is through, like David was saying earlier, like flying somebody to an event and housing them in a hotel or something, well, then you have to say that. It has to say, the influencer has to say, I was invited to this event by XYZ company, and I was flown here. They paid for that. They paid for my hotel, but the opinions I'm sharing here are mine. Now, if some of the content is sponsored, they have to say that too. This blog post was also sponsored by XYZ company. So say that right up front at the very beginning. Don't bury it down in the bottom of the blog post
where no one reads your last.
Yeah, come on.
So be transparent.
Put it up just be up at the front. I don't think the audience minds that. I mean, we see that every day anyway. It's when you try to hide it and pretend that it isn't, that's where people get upset, and rightly so.
You're
So-
right, Tom.
And David,
You're right,
it
Tom.
was
It's the transparency side of things that we've talked about 100 times over the last few years. And I mean, you have to trust your audience. Ultimately, you know, a lot of us want to do things for nothing, you know, but they've always said nobody does anything for nothing. But in the B2B sector, we ask for a reciprocal relationship. And if we're talking about being clear about whether it was sponsored or it's an advertisement or whatever, hashtag sponsored, hashtag ad, hashtag I have been paid for this service. You know, it can be the longest hashtag known to man, but it couldn't be clearer. And if the audience trusts you or even cares about you, if they want to actually read the article, they're going to look at the headline, they're going to see that you're saying that it's an endorsement of some sort, but based on your audience, based on your expertise, they're going to read it and then they're going to make up their own mind. And again, it boils down to trust. But if you're not going to be clear with the audience right from the offset about if you've been paid or not, or if you've been supported in any way, then that's your issue. Then, you know, that's your fault. I mean, like Tom said, no contracts with B2B influencers. Why bother? You know, they care about what they're talking about. You care about what they're talking about. There's honesty there.
If it's if it's sponsored content, then you're going to have some sort of, and it's an SOW. It's a statement of work, right? So you're going to lay out, okay, you know, that's essentially a contract. So you're going to lay out what's going to be
what's going to be posted,
what's
going to be
performed, right? You know, and I would lay out some things in there. You know, it's going to be evangelized 2 or 3 times, whatever, you know, next week or so, and after it's published or whatever it is, whatever you agree to. But if it's earned content, remember, I've had to approach the influencer and say to them, hey, I know you have a podcast here, for instance. You have guests on it. Would you be interested in having my client on? I think they'd be a good match. You know, that's earned. So
yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know,
that doesn't need to be in the contract. What was just also because there is a lot of, I would say, because you hear that a lot of influencers are not following the rules, but I think, and they all match, I would say, all influencers on one big pile, and they don't see the difference between the B2B and the B2C influencers, where in the B2B environment where we work, of course, on, I would say, on a different, in a different way. So I think
there's a couple of influential people to follow on this whole thing. And the first is in the UK, Rupa Shah. She's fantastic, and
we had her on the show a couple of weeks.
She's wonderful. And then in the United States, we have Robert Friend, and he's based out in LA, and he talks a lot on his Instagram account about this very issue. So, you know, the thing is that a lot of these consumer influencers seem to think, oh, it's just sort of, you know, wonky and I can do whatever I want. I just put, you know, I can bury the hashtag. Don't do that. Put the hashtag that it's sponsored content up at the very beginning, up at the front, so that everybody can see it. And you might even state it in the post itself. You know, just say, hey, this is sponsored by XYZ. You know, okay, great. You know, I mean, you know, it doesn't mean you have to love the product. It doesn't mean that you're gushing about it. I mean, there's, you know, usually the authenticity entails, you know, critiquing it a little bit, saying where, you know, what you didn't like about it a little bit. So, you know, you got to keep it real, but you got to be honest.
Yes, indeed. And I think that is because, we're a little bit over time. I think we can talk still for hours together with you two guys about influencers, about the word influencers. I think that will be an interesting.
Let's just keep it going.
An interesting episode for I would say for after the summer to talk about word influencers, that we should come up actually with a new word. I think they already came across. I really want to thank you both for your valuable input. Tom, thank you very much for joining. David, thank you very much for joining.
No problem.
I really, it really was. I hope that a lot of listeners have now insight, especially from the meetings and events industry, where we are really, I would say, suffering due to COVID-19. We're very happy that today in the Netherlands, the borders, I would say, the borders are open and we are allowed again to organize events at any size, as long as we keep the social distancing and the hygiene rules. We take a summer break, and our podcast will come live, so where you can listen to all the episodes on a time which is convenient for you. So thank you very much, guys, for joining. Thank you so much for your interesting questions, listeners, and I will see you after the summer.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.